Now we're going to go through section 4.5, which is graphing linear inequalities, or graphing systems of linear inequalities. So section 4.5 is graphing a system of linear inequalities. Okay, so I'm going to start off by reminding you on how to graph simple linear inequalities, and then we'll go into a couple systems of it. So for example 1, it'll just be to graph. Okay, so in part A, say I give you y is greater than 1/2 x plus 3. All right, I'm going to make myself a little graph. Okay, so first thing I'm going to check is my y on the left-hand side? Yes, it is. And is it positive? Yes, it is. That helps me a lot for my shading. Since it's inequalities, it's not just going to be a solid line. It could be dashed, and we got to make sure we're shading. Okay, but again, make sure your y is on the left and it's positive when you're starting these. So this one tells me to start at 3. So I go to 3, and I got a slope of 1/2. So I'm going to go up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. I'm also going to go down and left, down and left, down and left. Now, since it says greater than, it doesn't say equal to. Okay, it just says here, let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. Now it says y is greater than, so that means I have a dashed line. So I'm going to dash that line. Okay, now since it says y's are greater than that line, okay, if I look at this line, all my y's are greater above. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shade all of this that is above. And that would be the solution for that. Okay, let's try this again. In part B, let me move that over. Say I were to give you x is greater than or equal to 4. So let me set up another graph. Okay, so my variables on the left don't have a y, but I do have an x. Okay, and if I know what kind of a line an x line is, it's a vertical line, and it tells me to go to 4. So I'm going to go to 4 right here, and I'm going to draw a vertical line. Now, is my line dashed or is it solid? It's going to be solid because it said greater than or equal to. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to do a solid vertical line at 4. Now it says I want all the x values that are greater than or equal to. So if I come here, all the x's over here get more negative or get less. So I'm going to have all of this over here. So I'm going to shade my whole graph. And yes, I have to shade whatever space I gave my graph. I've got to make sure I shade that whole graph. So any point that falls within the shading is a solution to this inequality. Anything that does not fall in the shading is not a solution, just like here. Any of the points that were here in my shading, they're solutions to this. These are not solutions to the inequality. Okay, let's try one more on this one before we do a couple systems. So in part C, say I gave you 2x minus 4y is greater than or equal to 8. Okay, let me set up a graph. Okay, so when I look at this one, again, I'm going to look at my y. Is it on the left? Yes, it is. Is it positive? No, it's not. So I want to make it positive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide everything by a negative. So this is going to become a negative 2x. That's now going to become a positive 4y. Now when you divide inequalities by negative or multiply by negative, the sign switches. So this has to become a less than or equal to, and then that will become a negative 8. So now I'm going to use that top inequality instead, because again, I want my y to be on the left and be positive. So I can use a cover-up method with intercepts to graph. So if I cover this up, divide both of those by a negative 2, I get a 4. So my x value is 4. Okay, cover this up and divide. If I divide by 4, my y value is -2. Okay, so I'm going to keep with that pattern. So it went down 2 over 4. So I'm going to go down 2 over 4. And that's really all I have room for. Okay, now it says less than or equal to. So that means I do have a solid line. Okay, and then finally, it's the shading. And again, when I do the shading, I'm going to pick this top one because that's the one where my y was positive. Okay, so now it says you want less than or equal to. That means everything below. So I need to shade all of this that is below. Okay, so any point that is within the shading is a solution to the inequality. Okay, so now let's try a couple systems with this. So let's look at example 2. And again, I'm going to have this graph. X minus 2 is less than y is less than 4. So they happen to give me a compound inequality, and that's just not that easy to graph. So I'm going to separate it out. So I'm going to separate it out into its two parts. And again, we want y on the left. So if I look at this one, we have that x minus 2 is less than y. But I want y on the left-hand side, so I'm just going to move everything around. So rather than saying x minus 2 is less than y, I can say that y is greater than x minus 2. So y is greater than x minus 2. Okay, and then cover up that part. And then this one's already with the y on the left. So y is less than 4. So my y is less than 4. So that's how I can get my two inequalities from that compound inequality. All right, so now I need to set up a graph. Okay, so for this one, start at -2, and it says slope of 1, so let's go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, and then down and left, so forth and so on. Okay, all right, it says y is greater than, so I know I have a dashed line. Now, if you want to shade now, you can. I like to shade at the end, so I'm just going to give myself a little indicator as to where I'm going to shade. So it says my y is greater than, so it means I'm going to shade above the line. So I'm going to do little arrows just to show me that I'm supposed to shade above the line. Again, if you want to shade right now, you're more than welcome to. Now, this one says y is less than 4. Since I don't see an x value, that means we have a horizontal line at 4. So I'm going to go up to 4. Because it's not equal to, it's dashed. So I'm going to come up to 4 and do a dashed horizontal line. Okay, now it says y is less than that 4, so I'm going to shade below that line. Okay, so now I'm going to look at all my arrows and see where everything's pointing. So if I look at this section up here, it's not above that one. If I look at here, there's not even any points. Here, I can see there's some arrows, but those ones aren't. So it's going to be in this region right here. So if I come in between these two inequalities and shade all of that, that would be the solution to this system. So any point that is in the shading would be a solution. Okay, let's try your last one. So example 3. You are going to graph y is greater than or equal to the absolute value of x, and 3y is less than x plus 9. Okay, so that first one is fine. So I'm going to leave that first one alone, that y is greater than or equal to absolute value of x. What I don't like in the second one is that it's a 3y. So I'm just going to divide everything by 3. So divide by 3 is y. Divide by 3 is 1/3. Divide by 3 is 3. So that's the easier one for me to graph. So let me set up my graph. Okay, so for those of you that have never graphed an absolute value before, that's the graph that starts at 0, 0, and you just do one by one, it's a V. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start at 0, 0, and I'm going to go one by one. And then I'm also going to go one by one in the other direction. Now, since it could be equal to, it's nice and solid. So this here is solid. And this over here is also solid. So that's how you graph an absolute value. Okay. And it says that the y is greater than. So if I have my absolute value and the y's are greater than, it's going to be everything that's greater than, everything that's inside. So I'm going to draw my little arrows just to show me I need to graph inside this absolute value. Okay, now I go to the bottom one. This one says start at 3, so I'm going to start at 3. Now we're using a 1/3 slope. So I'm going to go up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3. Okay, and I'm also going to go down 1 over 3 and down 1 over 3. And this time it says y is less than, so it's going to be dashed this time. So this one here is dashed. And it says y is less than. So this time I've got to graph below. Okay, so now if I look at what I have, I've got to be within the absolute value, but I've also got to be below that line. Okay, what you'll see is it's this little triangular region right here, where it's inside the absolute value, but below the line. And that is how you graph a system of linear inequalities. Okay, good luck with your work.